The Time Machine. When the time traveler first told us about his invention, the time machine, none of us believed him. He always narrated his stories with such a straight face that it was hard to tell when he was joking and when he was serious. He was so clever and cunning that it was difficult to separate fact from fiction. That's why, at his previous dinner party, none of us believed a word about the time machine. Now, a week had passed, and here we were again, sitting around his table in the chairs he had designed. The time traveler had kept us waiting for half an hour. He had left a note telling us to start eating dinner if he hadn't returned by 7 o'clock. At the appointed hour, we sat down for dinner. We were halfway through our meal when our host finally walked in, looking completely bedraggled. His clothes were filthy and his hair was a mess. I looked down and saw that he wasn't wearing any shoes, just dirty, blood-stained socks. There was a half-healed cut on his chin. "Good God, man!" I cried. "What have you been up to?" Our host looked dazed, but a few sips of water seemed to help him recover. "I'll be fine," he said, starting to sound like himself again. "I have a most remarkable tale to share. But first, allow me to clean up and have a bite to eat." Once he had taken a bath and had some food, we moved to the drawing room. Here, the time traveler began his amazing story. My time machine finally began working at 10 o'clock this morning. After putting the last screw in place, I sat on the saddle and pushed the start lever. Almost immediately, I pushed the lever to stop. I felt dizzy, as if I were falling. I looked at the clock and realized something was wrong. It had been 10 a.m. a few seconds ago. Now, according to my clock, it was 3:30. The time machine had worked. I gripped the starting lever with both hands and away I went. The machine thudded along and everything around me began to look blurred. How can I describe the sensation of time traveling? It was like hurtling headlong down train tracks or a zigzag road. Days and nights passed by in seconds, and soon the room around me began to disappear. I reached a point in time when the room was destroyed. I saw many miraculously tall buildings. I saw the landscape change, trees growing and falling. I looked at the speedometer and realized that I was traveling at the rate of over 1 year per minute. My earlier discomfort had been replaced by a kind of excitement, which soon gave way to fear. I knew I would have to be careful where I stopped, making sure that my machine didn't crash into some other object. However, once the idea to stop had occurred to me, I knew it had to be done. So, I threw my weight upon the lever to stop. When I finally stopped, I lurched forward and was thrown out of the machine. I found myself in a garden. There was hail falling as thunder clapped in the background. I stood up and looked around, already soaked to the bone. Apart from the flowers and some trees, the only visible structure was a colossal white marble statue. It was a sphinx with wings spread out on the sides. The statue stood on a pedestal made of bronze. As I waited for the hailstorm to stop, my mind wandered. Where were all the people? Had humans died out? What if they had evolved into some cruel species with no humanity left? What if they saw me and thought I was a savage, a beast to be slaughtered? As these terrifying thoughts occurred to me, the hailstorm slowed down and soon the sun began to shine. I could distinguish the shapes of buildings, vast and tall, with intricate parapets and long columns. Close to panicking, I ran back to my time machine. It had overturned when I landed and I struggled to straighten it. Once I managed this, I felt more at ease. Feeling more courageous, I once again looked around. That's when I heard some voices. Some people were coming towards me. The first one was short, about 4 feet high, but an adult. He wore a purple robe cinched with a belt. I noticed how beautiful yet frail he was. As more people approached me, my fear subsided. These beautiful creatures were tiny and frail, and I could easily fight them and win if need be. Luckily, they came towards me smiling and laughing, all wearing similar colorful robes. They spoke a strange but beautiful language. When one spoke to me, I tried to use hand signals to show that I didn't understand what he was saying. He couldn't understand me either. Some of these creatures went to touch my time machine, but I made a gesture with my hand, telling them not to. Before any harm could be done, I removed the start and stop levers and kept them with me. The reading on my machine said it was the year 8,02,701 AD. I quickly realized that these future people seemed rather dim-witted. This was a great disappointment. I had expected future generations to be far more intelligent than us. For some reason, these people seemed to think that I had come from the sun. They kept pointing at it and then at me. Finally, I simply nodded. One creature, a female, I think it was hard to differentiate, came forward and laughed as she placed a garland around my neck. They led me away through a garden filled with strange plants and trees. They took me to a grey stone building. Inside, there was a communal hall filled with tables bearing fruit. Some looked like a kind of futuristic raspberry, some like oranges. I couldn't recognize most of the fruits. However, I ate them and they were delicious. In my 8 days there, I observed these people ate nothing but fruits. In fact, dogs, horses, sheep and cattle all appeared to be extinct. After eating, I thought the next thing to do was to learn their language. However, after much laughter and excitement, I only managed to learn a handful of words before they lost interest. I soon found that these people of the future, though excited by new things, had no true sense of curiosity. Besides, even if they did, they seemed to be too lazy to even try and learn. Because of this, I spent most of my days there on my own, with no guide to help me. I couldn't learn as much as I would have liked to. The more I looked around, the more I saw how poorly everything was maintained. There were beautiful buildings everywhere, all filled with wondrous carvings and stained glass. However, all of these were broken, cracked or chipped. Their gardens too were overgrown. The people of the future were lazy indeed. I climbed up a hill to survey the land. Here, I was finally left alone. The future people were too weak to climb up here. I watched as the sun set, and it occurred to me now that this might be one of the last stages of human civilization. In my time there, I saw no signs of battle and no signs of disease. Their gardens, though unkempt, had no weeds, and there were no insects or gnats floating about in the air. Mankind had triumphed over everything, disease and nature, and was living in great splendor and comfort. Only now, because of this, the people had grown soft and weak. The great buildings had in all likelihood been built when the only thing man had to pursue was art. Now, with artistic aspirations out of their systems, these people of future did no more than eat, play, and dance in the sun. Soon, this urge would leave them too. What would happen then? it was only after the moon had risen that I set back down the hill. I used the Sphinx as a guiding star, as the white marble shone in the moonlight. However, as I walked, I noticed something strange. My time machine was no longer on the lawn before the Sphinx. The little people couldn't have moved it. They were too frail and lazy. So where could it be? I ran down to the lawn and looked everywhere, behind the bushes and trees and rocks. I thrashed plants aside, kicked rocks, and worked myself up to a frenzy. Finally, with nothing left to do, I returned to the large grey building and fell into a fitful slumber. In the morning, I returned to the lawn and found the spot where my time machine had landed. Leading away from that very spot were small, strange footprints that ended at the pedestal of the Sphinx. So, some other creatures had taken my time machine and hidden it in the pedestal. I could not open the door at the Sphinx pedestal, nor would any of the people help me. However, now that I knew where it was, I felt more at ease. I tried once again to interact with the strange future people. I had a box of matches with me, and lighting them seemed to scare these people. I even explored some more, especially the odd wells. Looking down one, I saw it was very deep, so deep that I could not see any water. Oddly, I could hear the thudding of machines coming from the wells and blasts of air as well. I thought, perhaps, there was some kind of ventilation or a sanitation system. I was wrong.